Hey guys, welcome back to Learn Python the Hard Way. Today we're going to focus on exercise 26, which is actually going to be a test that we're taking. And as always, you can find the link to the current chapter, to the current exercise in the description below. Since this is part of the paid section of the book, you would actually need to purchase the book to follow along, or alternatively, feel free of course to just take a look at the video and follow with these steps. So we are now almost done with the first half of the book, and in the second half of the book we are going to focus on working with logic and writing more elaborate and more expressive programs. But before we continue, we have a quiz here that we are going to work on, and this is about fixing somebody else's code. So when we are programming, we quite often have to deal with other programmers' code. And we also need to make sure that we understand their code, and of course, if there are any bugs, any errors in them, that we are able to fix it. So in this exercise, we have actually some versions of the code in exercise 24 and 25 copied into a separate file over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually copy and paste this starter file over into a new file. And then we're going to take a look if we can identify all the errors, and of course we should fix them. So to get started, let's actually head over to our terminal window here, and here we're going to open a new Python file. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, and therefore in our directory I'm going to type out code space and then the name of the Python file. So in this case exercise 26.py for Python, which is going to open a new Python file. And here we can now copy and paste in the code, and we can already see that there is some highlighting that appears that shows us that actually there are some errors that have been made. So let's actually get started, and our goal is to correct all the errors so that our code file runs correctly and also that the output is what we would expect. So most of these errors are related to some Python syntax errors, so that, for example, a quotation mark is missing at the end of a string. That would be one example, but there will also be some logical errors included in here. So let's take a look and let's get started at the beginning. We have a print statement here, how old are you, and we have a separate end parameter here, which basically, or end argument in here, which means that at the end we don't have a new line when we run the print statement, but we have a space character that's added. Next we get some input and store it in the age variable. That's looking good as well. And then we are printing out how tall are you, so we are asking for additional input here. We're printing that out in a new line, without a new line with a space character. And we have here the print statement, how much do you weigh? And then we take an input here and we store that again in a variable, and we call that one weight. And we can see there's already here highlighting the red lines here. That means there's something wrong. And if we take a look at the previous line here, we can see that the print statement starts with double quotes, but it never ends in double quotes. Or actually it does here, but we didn't close the parentheses. So that's something we have to do. And then we can see this is displayed properly here, and now weight equals input. That is now shown correctly. Next we use printf to print out a string. So your age old, which is a variable up here, height tall, and weight heavy. And we can see right now that height actually is not defined, so we wouldn't get a proper output here. So what we need to do is we actually should get some input and store that in the height variable. So it makes sense that if we take a look at the structure, we have the print statement here, and then the input function, which is storing a value in the age variable. We should do the same here when we ask about how tall a person is, and we should store that in the height variable here. So let's do that, because once we do that, we will be able to actually use the input here and print it out properly. Next, we're going to use script and file name and argv. And in order to use argv, we should actually be required to actually import that. Let's try that out first. If we just open the terminal here and we try to run our code file. Well, we actually see there are some other errors in there, but we should also see, once we fixed all the errors, that actually argv here should not be available to us unless we imported before. So what we did previously is that we said from the sys module, we're gonna import argv, and then we're gonna be able to use it and work with it. Next, we are going to open this input here, and there seems to be a typo in there, because here we have the variable file name, and this should likely be the same, so we're going to change that to file name. Now it's identical, so now we can pass that in and actually open the file name. Next, we print out, here's your file, and we have the file name, and then we print, and it says tx.read, and that should be txt, because this is basically the file object that we are saving in the variable. So that should be print txt.read here. Next, we have a print statement, type the file name again. File again would be input, and we have an input prompt that we enter in here, and then whatever we enter in there will be stored in file again. And now we're going to open file again here and store that in another text object, or file object, excuse me, called txt again. We're now going to print out txt again, and there seems to be an error here because it says txt underscore again underscore read. But what we want to do is we want to call .read basically, so the function or method on this particular file object here. So instead of having this underscore here, we should change that to .read, and now that should work correctly. Next, we have a print statement here, and we have, in this case, single quotes as opposed to double quotes, which we used up here. But now we can see, because we are using single quotes, actually the string starts here at the beginning, and then it stops here at let, because we are using another single quote, which basically ends our string here, and we don't, the rest of it would basically be a variable, would not be a string. And there are basically two ways we could fix that. One option would be to change the single quotes into double quotes, so that should work. Or alternatively, we can use what we learned about escape sequences and enter a backslash in front of the quotation marks, the single quotes, and that works as well. We can see the color now changes here for our string that we want to print out, and it's displayed correctly. Now in the next line we have basically another error that is highlighted here. You'd need to know about escapes with that two new lines and tabs. Okay, and I think the issue here is that we are spanning more than one line. Let's just briefly try this out. Yeah, so if we have that in the same line, then that works correctly. If we print that out in two lines, then instead we would have to use another approach. So what we could do is we could use those triple double quotes that we learned about before. So something along those lines here. And that would also work. Or in this case, likely easier, if we just change that back. We can just print that out in a single line, and that works as well. Let me just try one thing. Yeah, what we could also do is, I think that should also work if we have a backslash in here and then the next statement here, but for simplicity's sakes, let's just remove that here and have it in a single line. All right. After that, we have a new variable called poem, and here we have a tab and then some text and a new line in there. And here at the end we have a new line, a tab, and another tab. After that we want to print a number of dashes, and we already see there's again something displayed in red. Here at the end of our print statement, actually before the parentheses, we should close our quotation marks and basically mark that as a string. And we print the poem, and here we have basically the opposite error. So here at the end we have double quotes, but we never open them. So let's add that in here. And now we have the print statement, the correct print statement before and after we print out our poem. Then we have the variable 5, and we assign it 10 minus 2 plus 3, and then we have a minus, but actually we are missing any number that would be displayed after that. So that's an incorrect statement, of course, if we have a minus at the end. So if that should actually be 5, then 10 minus 2 would be 8, plus 3 would be 11. So we would have to deduct 6 here, and then that should be properly stored as a value of 5. Now we go ahead and we print out using printf. This should be 5, and we pass in the value for 5. Now after that we have a function. We can see that because we are using the def keyword, a space, and then we have the name of the function. And now we can already see there are some curly braces, because at the end of the function, of course, we need to have a colon, and then we basically can start with our function definition. So here we would have an indentation, actually with 4 space characters. So these are 2 tabs in this case, which looks correct. We have a variable called jellybeans, and we take the value of started, which we take here as a parameter, or later when we use the function as an argument. We multiply this with 500 and store it back in jellybeans. We take jellybeans, divide it by 1000 and store it in jars. And then we take jars, and there seems to be something missing. So in this case, we would likely have some mathematical operation. So maybe jars divided by 100. That would be stored back in crates, and then we return back jellybeans, jars, and crates. So those 3 variables that we defined up here. And we still have some highlighting going on here. Let's just take a look. Secret formula storage. We may have to revisit that in a little bit. But let's for now just continue. We have the start point here, and we assign this variable to 10,000. Then we have 2 variables, beans and jars, and we have the secret formula up here, and we pass start point to it, and the return value here, we store that back in those variables. But we can see that the function itself actually returns 3 different values: jellybeans, jars, and crates. We try to store that in only 2 variables, so that doesn't match. So we need to update that. We have beans here, which should be matched to jellybeans. We have jars. What we are missing are crates, or any other variable. Of course, we are free to name that whatever we like. So let's change that to crates. And now we basically assign that to the 3 different variables. All right, after that we have a comment here, and then a print statement with the starting point of. And then we have curly braces, and we use .format in this case to pass a variable to those curly braces. So here we pass in start point, which has a value of 10,000. We have another comment, and here we're using printf instead of .format. And we pass in beans, jars, and crates. So those 3 variables we defined up here. And they are then displayed and printed out in our print statement. Now we have start point, and we divide that by 10. And just to use some shorthand notation, what we could also do is we could say it's divided equals. Instead of start point equals start point divided by 10, we could do this if we wanted to. That would have the same effect, but let's change that back to not modify the original code. And now we have a print statement here. We can also do that this way. We take a new variable formula, and then we call our function secret formula again, and we pass start point to it. And here, if we take a look, I'm highlighting it, but actually we called it start underscore point before. So therefore, let's just update that, and then it should work correctly. Now after that, we have a print statement again, and here we're using .format. So we have 3 curly braces, and then we call .format, and we pass star formula to it. And again, we're using that asterisk here to pass in basically a list of values. Now going further down, we have people equals 20, Kates equals 30, and dogs equals 15. And now we have an if statement that we just learned about briefly before. So here we say if people is smaller than cats, and this likely should be cats. So let's change that to cats. So if people is smaller than cats, then print, yeah, and here we are missing the parentheses, so let's add those. That would be what we do after that. If people is smaller than cats, which is basically the same if statement, not too many cats, the world is saved. Okay, that just logically doesn't make that much sense. Let's just take a look at it. So people is smaller than cats. So you have more cats than people, too many cats. That just logically should probably be the other way around. So if we say we have more people than cats, then we have not too many cats. Not many cats, the world is saved. If people is smaller than dogs, so if you have more dogs than people, then print out the world is drooled on. And if we have more people than dogs, and here we are missing the colon, then print out the world is dry. All right, now we take dogs and we increase it by a value of 5. And now we check if people is greater than or equal to dogs. And then we print out people are greater than or equal to dogs. That's looking good. Then if people is smaller than or equal to dogs, here we are missing the colon again. We print out people are less than or equal to dogs. Yeah, and here at the end we are missing again the double quotes to finish our string. And here at the bottom we have if people equals dogs, and here if we use a single sign it would basically be an assignment operation. What we want to do here is we want to check for equality, and in that case we are using two equal signs. So if people equal dogs, then we print out people are dogs. I don't know how much sense that makes. All right, so that's, I think, looking good so far. The only issue is here back the function definition. So let's just hover over that. Maybe I'm just not seeing it at the moment what the issue is. Oh, it's actually up here, the line above. Didn't see that before. Here we are opening parentheses and we are not closing it. All right, so now it should be fine. So let's scan our file again, and I don't see any errors popping up. So let's open the terminal again, and let's just try executing our file again. So it starts out with a print statement here, how old are you, which is the first one in here. So let's just type in a value, how tall are you? And then again, of course, we always have those input calls here, which is why we are entering a value in here. And then we should provide our weight. And now we are running into an error here in line 12. So let's take a look at that. And it basically says not enough values to unpack. Expected 2 got 1. But the reason for that should be that we are not providing a file name when we actually execute our code file here. So let's just take a look at what kind of files we have in here. We have, for example, new file.txt or test.txt. So let's run our file here, and let's also pass to it test.txt, so that we have basically two command line arguments. First of all, of course, the script name, and then second of all, file name, which in this case is just this text file. So let's see how that's working. Let's just repeat the same input as before. All right, and now we don't get that error. So it says, so you're 20 years old, or 20 old, 180 tall, and 100 heavy. Okay, not very good English, but be it as it may. So then next we have, here's your file name. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, and there's, so it doesn't throw an error, but what we are missing here is basically an F, so that it's printf, because at the moment it's just printing out file name in those curly braces instead of actually basically replacing that with the actual file name, so test.txt. So let's just right now stop this real quick and run it one more time. And there can be a lot of those a little bit tricky errors. Now we can see here's your file test.txt. So this is now displayed correctly. It's embedded here in our output, in our print statement. And this is the content of the file, which are just 3 different lines. Type the file name again is the print statement here. And now it's asking us to provide an input. And we're using this, in those parentheses, the prompt that we're adding in here. So now we can add the file name. Let's just add test.txt again. All right, and that is file again, and we are opening that. Now here it's print. We print it out, so we say print.txt again .read. So therefore we see those 3 lines again. After that we run print. Let's practice everything. You'd need to know about escape with backslash. Yep, new lines and tabs, so that looks correct. And then here we are printing those dashes followed by the poem that we defined here. We have those dashes again, and down here we defined a new variable 5, and we print out this should be 5, and then we are rendering the value for 5, which is indeed 5, with the starting point of, and let's just scroll down here. So here we have the print statement with the starting point of format, and we pass in start point, which has a value of 10,000. And here we defined that function secret formula, which we call down here, and we return beans, jars, and crates. And those return values, which are assigned to those variables here, those variables are being used down here in the print statement. So we basically say we'd have this amount of beans, this amount of jars, and then this amount of crates. So that is this section here. Yeah, and then we basically say we can also do that this way, and we basically should print out the same as above. So here we can see this line is basically identical to the one over here. Yeah, except for we decreased start point here by a value of 10, and then we called that again. So therefore here, that's basically an order of magnitude smaller. So instead of 50, we have 5, for example. Instead of 5,000, we have 500. So that was that section. Then if we go down here, we have those if statements. So if people is smaller than cats, if you take a look at that, we have, for people, we have a value of 20. For cats, we have a value of 30. So indeed, this is true. Then we print out too many cats, the world is doomed, which is printed out here. The second statement, people greater than cats, is not true because cats has a value of 30 and people has a value of 20, and 20 of course is not greater than 30. Next we have if people is smaller than dogs, which is also not true, so that's not executed. But then we have people greater than dogs, which is true because 20 is greater than 15, so we print out the world is dry. This one here. And now what we change is we increase dogs by 5. So instead of 15, we now have 20 dogs. And now we run if people is greater than or equals to dogs. And people is still 20, dogs is 22 as well. So here now that statement is true because people, while it's not greater than 20, it's equal to 20. So we print out people are greater than or equal to dogs. Like this. And then of course the reverse, people as smaller than or equal to dogs, is also true. So people are less than or equal to dogs should be printed out. And then finally here, if people is equals to dogs, so if 20 is equal to 20, then print out people are dogs. And that is printed out as well. And so far that looks correct. So when we ran the file up here and we passed the correct command line arguments, so the name of the Python file, but also the text file, it executed correctly. We did some computations on using those variables here, printing them out using a function definition, and also working with our file by printing out the file, entering the file name again and printing it out once more. And at the end also we used some Boolean statements here to print out certain statements depending on some conditions. So if, for example, there were more people compared to dogs. So finally, let's take a look at the common student questions here. So the first one is, do I have to import exercise25.py or can I just remove the reference to it? So in this case, we can do either. The file has the functions from exercise 25 though, so first go with removing references to it. So both are possible. Can I run the code while I'm fixing it? You most certainly can. The computer is there to help, so use it as much as possible. So we noticed that before when we ran the file and we still had some errors in there, we got those errors displayed, and that can be helpful to narrow down where there still may be some issues that we have to take a look at. So that's it for exercise 26, and see you guys next time in the next video with exercise 27.